This is Telling the Story, a podcast dedicated to exploring faith, spirituality, arts, and culture, hosted by Ninth Hour Theatre Company in Ottawa, Canada. Thank you for joining us for our podcast series discussing a brand new theatrical work called Frankenstein A.I., a modern play adaptation based on the 19th century novel by Mary Shelley. In this podcast series, we thought it would be interesting to discuss the stories and themes expressed in Frankenstein A.I. in greater detail, to not only deepen and enrich yours and our understanding, but for the sheer pleasure of it. Throughout the series, we'll talk with special guests and discuss things such as the morality and ethics around creating artificial general intelligence, whether AGI can be considered a friend or foe, hazard or tool, the value and quality of human relationships, transhumanism and what it means to be human, as well as the tensions between a creator and the created. What makes our podcast unique is that you'll also get an insider's look at the many artistic and production decisions that are made in putting together a theatrical production as we develop this original work. So sit back and settle in for a stimulating dive into deep ideas and the world of theater magic. I'm so excited today for episode 5 of the Telling the Story podcast surrounding the new theatrical work, Frankenstein A.I., that Ninth Hour Theatre Company is currently developing. It's very exciting. We've had many great discussions so far about episode 1. We talked about the story itself and the context in which it was written and why the play was written. And then episode 2, we talked about the science behind some of this technology and some of the morality and ethics that go with the development of artificial general intelligence. And then episode 3, we talked about AI in media and radio and what does it mean to be creative and to be an artist. And episode 4, we talked about vocations, nurses, teachers, ministers. We talked a lot about the quality and nature of human relationships and what's so special about being human. And so today on episode 5, we want to talk about some more on expanding a little bit from the last episode. We want to talk about transhumanism and the successor species. For what it's worth, we'll be just asking a lot of questions and just kind of digging into that because there's a lot said out there and those are big loaded words. And what do they even mean? And I'm not here to say I have all the answers, but I do like having discussion about things and learning more. And so I'm excited to be joined by 2 returning guests today. I'm joined by KELTIE NEWMARCH, and KELTIE is one of the Ninth Hour performing artists currently participating in the development of Frankenstein A.I. KELTIE was also an assistant stage manager for the 2024 production of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, as well as playing one of the puppeteers for Aslan in the 2023 production of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. KELTIE is a thoughtful professional when it comes to philosophy, culture, mental health, human psychology, and relationships. I've had the privilege of sitting down with her and just chatting about life and so many other things. So welcome, KELTIE. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, for a second one, huh?
Yeah.
Yes. And then I'm also joined for the second time by William Stewart. William Stewart has his PhD in computer science. He's developed and managed large computing centers. Most recently, he has delivered more than 330 on-site project management courses to more than 4,000 people. He grew up all over the world on military bases and now lives in Ottawa, Canada with his wife and 2 children. And for a full list of his interests and publications, you can visit his website, which will be in the description of this podcast. So, William, I know you prefer that I call you Bill, so welcome to the podcast for the second time.
Oh, thank you very much, Charlie. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Excellent. So I'm so stoked to get into this discussion with you guys. Yeah, Bill, we were talking earlier and it sort of struck me that it's easy to sort of confuse or just, conflate, I suppose, terms and definitions or what exactly are we talking about? And here at the Telling the Story podcast, a lot of our discussions, they surround the play Frankenstein A.I. and the themes that come up. but it's not always talking about AI per se. We're talking about what it means to be human and all these things. But yeah, I wonder if we could spend a few moments, Keltie and Bill, maybe just sort of for ourselves, even defining or unpacking what do we mean by artificial intelligence? What do we mean by artificial general intelligence, which is the android in the Frankenstein AI play? And then also, perhaps, what's the difference between those things and just general computer programming or just general technological advancement, including in the medical field and stuff? So, like, Bill, like, can you give us some sort of definition, perhaps, in your opinion, on what artificial intelligence is, and then what artificial general intelligence is?
Well, I'll give it a shot. There's a lot of stuff that is just programming.
Okay.
For example, we were talking earlier about those amazing drone shows. We see a lot of colored drones, and they do patterns in the sky. And that's straight up programming. Guys have programmed that. The program, they ask it to do something, it does exactly that. Then when we move into artificial intelligence, I put it into 3 tiers. The first tier would be things like reading x-rays. So there's been technology out there for quite a while. You train a program on thousands and thousands of x-rays, and you teach it where to find abnormalities. Then you give it a new x-ray it's never seen before. And based on its training, its neural net training, it can figure out whether or not there's any abnormalities in something it's never seen before.
Wow.
They call that AI, but that's really just very, very sophisticated programming. It's able to process data it hasn't seen before. That's cool. They call it AI. Then the next level of AI is what we're seeing now in these chatbots, the chat GPT, et cetera. That's really the first time we've seen something that we can call AI that looks like us, because we can have conversations with it about subjects that it has never encountered before. It's just scraped the entire internet and put it together. It's not actually intelligent behind the scenes, but it's certainly acting that way. When it comes to language, it's pretty darn close. Then the next level, which is supposedly coming, some people say in a year or 2, some people say 20, is artificial general intelligence. And that's when we've got software that can process any kind of data, not just x-rays, not just text and words, but you give it any data at all, and it'll be able to figure out the patterns, including patterns in its own programming. So you'll be able to give an AGI program its own program, and it will be able to potentially, they say, evolve itself. That's the next level, and that's the level that people are afraid of, because once you've got an AGI that can evolve itself, it can evolve itself in microseconds, over seconds, days at the most.
You talked about that on the last podcast you were on, and it did sort of alarm me that, well, it reminded me, right, that in a microsecond, a switch is flipped and it's going in a different direction, whereas human beings, we're not like that. We don't adapt in a microsecond to be a different sort of person. Whereas you were saying, like, that's very conceivable that that's possible for a machine, of course.
Yeah, and people are starting to get worried about that because you can't really compartmentalize these things. What if it finds a fault in a network switch somewhere and it escapes onto the internet? And it goes off and installs itself in servers around the world. It's loose now. How do you stop that? How do you even
like the character in the play, right, Keltie? It's loose. It's run amok.
Yeah. That's the doomsday scenario that a lot of people are worried about.
Yeah. So can you give me an example? So would it be like with an artificial general intelligence, it's sort of like, oh, I really need something. I really need a program that can help me do this. So I'm asking the artificial general intelligence to come up with a program. Whereas like previous to that, you just have a program or you don't have one, but you're asking it to invent something to help you with something. Is that what you mean? And by general, you mean it can do basically anything that you ask of it within the realm of technology?
Well, current technology, current AI is already pretty close to what you described.
Okay.
For example, I come from a computer programming background, and I used to say, well, there's one thing it'll never be able to replace is computer programming.
Oh.
Well, for a year or so now, you've been able to go to ChatGPT and say, create a fault-tolerant dual-server website for financial analysis of hedge fund data, and make the website pleasing to the eye. And it can go and figure that stuff out. That stuff's already there. But AGI would be able to process any kind of data at all, data that it's never seen before. And so the supposition is that it will be able to become conscious. It'll become aware of itself. It'll be able to process its own program. That's the fear. I don't think it's ever going to become conscious myself because it doesn't have a body and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But that's the fear that's out there.
The theoretical that it will become sentient, that word, right? That people like to use. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that, Keltie, so far, what Bill was saying?
I honestly, I really don't know a lot about the difference between AI and AGI, but as you were talking, what I was turning over in my head was like, that is the ultimate free will, to be able to adjust yourself, switch, grow, evolve on a dime.
Wow.
It's really interesting. But then I think that's something that keeps human beings in check when we engage and use our own free will, is we learn from our consequences. So I ask myself, does AGI have access to that kind of self-correction? Like if AGI suffers a consequence, does AGI actually suffer a consequence? Like, do you know what I mean?
We talked about that last time with Bill about it doesn't have pain because it doesn't have a body, it doesn't have blood and all these things. So it can't be hurt in the way that like a biological organism is hurt physically, but also even if you're not hurt physically, who would debate that you can just be hurting for emotional, psychological reasons? So like, I guess like someone would have to prove to me that the machine can feel pain and it can be hurt, and that there's jeopardy involved, and that like as you were pointing out, that there's consequences for the action to the AGI. Sure, there's going to be consequences to other people and other organisms or whatever. Let's solve let's solve this crisis. Oops, 200,000 people died. So yes, there's consequence, but is there consequence to the AI? Whereas us, if we do something that perhaps is not good for us, there's consequences felt. Even if not physical, then emotional, psychological.
Yes, absolutely. If we try something out and it doesn't work out and we fail, we feel the sting of failure and can learn from that failure. But does AGI feel sting of failure? I don't necessarily.
And shame. Yeah. Like that drives so much of people's behaviors often, is shame, buried shame, bottled shame, So again, like this, that couples with the morality we were talking about, right, Bill? That it's easy to imagine something that's performing emotion, and that really hurt me, Bill. But it's like, but I'm programmed to give it that voice, and to even maybe look you in the eyes with a little bit of glisten in my eye. I can perform that I'm hurt, but I'm not hurt. So it's like, it's very deceiving, right?
Exactly. I don't think that AI, AGI, anything based on silicon, on programming, will ever be able to understand any of the things you guys are talking about. Pain, shame, conscience, all of that stuff. So if there is a path towards transhumanism, which is debatable, I mean, we can talk about that. But if there is, I really believe it's got to be based on evolution of our biology. And that raises a whole other can of worms. But unless whatever comes next is based on human DNA and human biology, then it won't be rooted to any of these guardrails you're talking about, Keltie. It won't be rooted to any of the guardrails, the seatbelts that prevent us from becoming prevent non-psychopathic people from becoming psychopathic.
Right.
Where in AGI, that guardrail will never be there. It will always be able to become psychopathic in a nanosecond.
Yeah, and so let's talk about. There's a word that I first heard about this word maybe 5 years ago now, I think. And someone was telling me with great excitement, you're like, have you heard of transhumanism? And I was always like, do they mean transgender? Like I was always confused what they were talking about and stuff. No, transhumanism. And, I'm a big sci-fi fan. So I was just trying to understand what they meant. But at the time, it didn't interest me. And I was like, oh, yeah. But then, but now it does in the context of the development of this play and all that. Because Victor Frankenstein in the play created Adam I, the artificial general intelligence android, to basically help humanity, to replace humanity. Even there's questions in there, and Victor Frankenstein's morality is debatable in the play, and very much doesn't think much of humanity, obviously, despite other characters arguing and advocating for more thought being put into the AGI. And we've had so many wonderful discussions in the workshop series about just trying to get off this idea that the AGI is doing anything other than what it was programmed to do. And so you're trying to put, like, there's this great scene in a courtroom where the judge is like, well, maybe we should put the creator on trial then, like Victor Frankenstein, instead of the AGI. Because someone, and it's like interesting, right? Where it's like, okay, if the AGI is going around running amok, which it is in the play, like, you have to come to this place, like, who's to blame? Is it the AGI if that's all the AGI was programmed to do and didn't, like, once again, like, there's no guardrails in this AGI in the play. So, but coming back to what I was talking about, transhumanism, what exactly is that? I mean, I vaguely know, but do either of you have some light to shed on what is transhumanism? What do people mean by that?
I'll give it a shot.
Give it a shot, yeah. I mean, I've heard it said lots, right?
I think there's some value behind it. I think how we go about it is absolutely critical. And if there's a value behind it, it's that we're on a journey in this universe. We came from nothing in the Big Bang. We've got life, we got primates, we got humans, we created society, civilization, art, science, culture. We seem to be on some sort of journey if you look at the long path. And so you would think that naturally this wouldn't be the stopping point. There would be something that comes next. But that's not going to be evolution anymore because we don't have the pressures of the jungle. You better be smart and learn how to work in teams or you're going to go extinct. We don't have that anymore. So the question is, well, we're in charge now. How do we create what comes next? And I do believe that that's a valid approach. I think it's time for us to stand up and take charge of our own existence and our own future and define something that comes next. The question is how to go about it. Do we start creating androids? Where the word originally came from, where we start melding technology to us. I don't think that's really going to get us anywhere sustainable. That's just temporary enhancement. It's like wearing glasses. Then we get into the question of, okay, well, if you believe as I do that human biology and DNA is an absolute miracle, it's sustainable, it's got empathy built into it, it has some of those guardrails built into it, it's not going to become psychopathic in a nanosecond, maybe we should progress human DNA. Then we get into a whole bunch of questions that I don't have all the answers to because it's so difficult to know how to do that. You might say, okay, well, we'll just select for intelligence. There's nothing wrong with that, right? More intelligent people. But there's no single gene for intelligence. That's distributed across a whole bunch of different aspects of DNA that we don't even understand. And what we really don't want to do is start deselecting for empathy.
What do you mean by that?
Well, for me, that's the one big guardrail. If I could come up with one starting point and pass a regulation or a law for anybody that's going to do genetic engineering, I would say...
Like designer babies type? Is that what you're kind of talking about? Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
And there's a lot of that going on. Some of it's very good. We've already eliminated genetic disease in several babies, living human beings. We've got this CRISPR technology, and we've eliminated disease in them. We've got these embryo screening. There's clinics that they're stand up right now. They'll screen dozens of embryos and tell you which one is the best one to plant. But it's going to go to the next level. It's going to be analogously, here's a computer screen. How many genes would you like from column A, column B, column C? And of course, the fear is we're going to have all these super intelligent, tall, blonde, blue-eyed Aryan race people.
Right.
But I think the danger is beyond that. If we just start selecting for things, and there's any danger we deselect for empathy, then we're on a very, very, very dangerous path.
Right, like screening out, like drawing a line at what you screen out in the creation of a human being. Right, that's a debatable line. And as you pointed out, Bill, there's so many things you want to screen out that would that cause so much pain and suffering, in a sense. And if you have the technology to screen it out, perhaps you should, Perhaps you should not, though, too. I mean, to me, it's still an ongoing, for me at least, ethical question. But I like what you're saying, Bill. Like, it's not that the evolution of the human species is a bad thing. It's certainly inevitable. It's already happened. It's already occurred, and it's continuing to occur. And you're just saying you think it's better if it's a more biological evolution. It's through DNA and maybe through certain medical technologies. You brought up glasses, but of course, there's replacement body parts. There's pacemakers. There's surgeries of all kinds that without those surgeries, maybe you die prematurely. Maybe you lose mobility in that limb. Maybe your heart no longer functions. All sorts of medical advancements in technology that didn't exist 100 years ago, even. And in a sense, we are a different species because of it. We're not dying in childbirth as much. We're not dying at age 50 as much anymore, right? So, like, is that what you're saying? So there's technology helping, but ultimately, it's just helping the biological body live longer, really, or be more functional.
I think there's probably a range of things we should absolutely be doing. I'm not sure what those are, but I think there's some that we should be doing. However, let's take a real concrete example. Should we start screening genetically or engineering embryos that eliminate mental illness? Some people would say, well, of course, let's get rid of all that suffering. But then look what you've done to human history. You've got no Beethoven. You've got no, you just go down the line.
Just go down. You get
these
Alan Turing. You're screening him out, and that's the whole Turing test, which is right,
exactly. There's no single gene. They're all related. It's a very, very complex, interrelated structure, and along with deviance from. I mean, if we start doing that, we could end up with a population of extremely happy, boring people that never do anything.
Right, because you're not going to innovate and create if everything's fine, everything's great. Like, wouldn't you? Don't you innovate out of need? Don't you create out of, out of emotion and things like,
Exactly. So those are the kind of principles I think we've got to figure out, and I don't think we have answers. It's not as simple as, well, just figure out what the genes are for these list of illnesses, and we'll just eliminate all of them in any future embryos. That is a very dangerous path because of this interrelated structure of the human being. There's some things I think you can, like the disease that the baby was recently treated for. It's a very common one that hits black kids. What's the name of it? I can't remember it. Anyway, this poor little kid, they actually went in and with CRISPR technology, they eliminated the defect in the genes and saved that kid. For all that from the rest of their lives. But there's very, very few clear cases of that. And the relationship between intelligence, divergence from the mental norm, creativity it's all very interrelated. We don't want a bunch of very happy, normal, boring people.
I don't. That's for sure. And well, yeah. Go ahead, Keltie. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, how do you decide what the line is? Because if right now transhumanism is using the technology we have to help people see better, or to give people cochlear implants so they can hear better, or using CRISPR technology to take an embryo that genetically is vulnerable to this disease or genetic defect, and now they're no longer, like, who's decided that this quality of life is not one that we want for our children? However, this level of suffering is something that we'd be okay for our children to have. Like, who gets to decide that? And where is the line?
I know. It's playing God in a sense. And it's hard to be black and white about it. But like there's, great point, Keltie. And mental health, it's interesting because over the years, I've heard so many people's, some very knowledgeable in these areas, mental health, addiction in general, all sorts of things, even sexuality. There was a big push at one point that there was a gene for that, and all sorts of things like that. But I think I'm much more with you on this, Bill, like that a lot of these things are complicated and interconnected and complex, and removing some aspect from someone, removing the potential of that thing from somebody, even intelligence, as you pointed out, Bill. I think there's a school of thought out there that everything is sort of like simple, like everyone has an IQ and it's like a biological thing. Everyone has a sexuality, it's a biological thing. Everyone has mental health issues and it's hereditary and it's a biological thing. Everyone has, what's the other example? Oh, addictions, and it's hereditary and it's a biological thing. Now, I don't pretend to know if it is or isn't, but I do see with my own eyes and experience with my own life and everyone I know and the work I've done in my life that it is more complex than just that, than just, if only we had a pill that took away that thing. And it's like, and of course, pills can help and all those sorts of things. But yeah, it's always just seems more complex, these human issues. But is there not a school of thought out there that it isn't complex and it things can be remedied easily, right? With a pill, with a click of a button, with a neuro implant that, just takes away all anxiety. I've read the stories out there. There's lots of it out there, right?
Sure. Like if we're evolving to improve and improve and improve, and we've evolved enough that we can invent this technology that'll make our life better, why wouldn't we take advantage of that? I understand that logic. It makes a lot of sense. Well, we've invented this drug that will make me feel better. I won't feel like dying anymore. Why wouldn't I take it? I have access to it. I can see the logic there.
Totally.
I think that my question is, though, where does it end, right? Like there just has to eventually, nothing is ever going to feel sufficient. We'll just reach this perfect version of human. I don't know. I don't think that exists either. Yeah. Yeah,
because who gets to define what's a perfect human? Yeah. People have tried in history, Yeah.
And adversity is good for us. Like moving through adversity is really, really great. It helps us become more resilient, right? And resilience is what has kept us alive so far. So I think that's where I get stuck. Sure, there are a lot of really great things that AI and technology have done for us. But eventually there's an end. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know the answers either, as you were saying, Keltie, but one thing I do think is that the conversations we're having here is the start of finding those answers. And there's got to be a lot more of those. I'd like to see conferences. I'd like to see universities holding conferences. I'd like to see TV shows where there's debates. I'd like to see government striking committees to start talking about this stuff, because otherwise it's just going to happen. And you've already got people like Elon Musk, who in many areas is one of the most brilliant people on the planet. In other areas, clearly has significant deficits. You've already got people like him who are creating his own group of people. He's got at least a dozen kids. Some people say dozens. My understanding is that he finds a woman that he thinks is smart, and his deal is $15 million down, $100,000 a month until the kid's 18. What do you think? We don't even have to meet. And that kind of mentality, it's a small step from that to, I'm going to stand up my own little lab somewhere and start leveraging the best genetic engineering we've got. And the mindset of people like that is a little bit dangerous. There's this little quote here I wanted to read to you guys.
Sure.
This came out not long ago. Elon was interviewed, and he said, so I got a quote here and then a really nice response to it. He said, "The fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy. The empathy exploit. They're exploiting a bug in Western civilization, which is the empathy response."
Whoa.
In other words, the weak and the less adequate are exploiting empathy to continue to support the weak and the less adequate, and we should really be supporting only the best and the smartest to move towards this transhumanist nirvana.
Whoa.
And a lot of people at the top believe that, because they're hanging around a lot with very smart, accomplished people, and they start to have contempt for those below them. And
I see that often.
You
Yeah.
see it all over the place. When this quote came out, I noticed in several places people responded with the following quote. This happened in more than one place. A quote from Captain G.M. Gilbert, an Army psychologist assigned to watching the defendants at the Nuremberg trials. And he wrote later on, "In my work with the defendants at the Nuremberg trials, I was searching for the nature of evil, and I now think I have come close to defining it. A lack of empathy. It's the one characteristic that connects all the defendants, a genuine incapacity to feel with their fellow men. Evil, I think, is the absence of empathy." So if we've got people at the top of the food chain, I mean, Elon he's in charge of Grok, the big AI thing on X, one of the most successful after ChatGPT. We've got people at the top who are just looking at the end game of transhumanism and believe that's got to be all about intelligence and good looks and athletic capability, and think that there's something weak about empathy. We're going to end up creating a future that will fall apart, because empathy is the glue that connects not just human civilization, but existence, ideas itself.
Yeah.
And without that glue, Elon doesn't realize it, but his future will fall apart.
I just feel like that reduces, without empathy for one another, that reduces us to what is it that we can do? What is our function? What can we produce? What can we produce?
It comes down to our value again, doesn't it?
Yeah, it comes down to our value. And that feels so sad to me.
Yeah, a utilitarian value.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. You're only, this is in the play again. This is in the play Frankenstein A.I. that you're only of value as long as you are valuable to me. Like, as long as I perceive you to have value to me, then then you're valuable. Otherwise you're worthless, essentially. This empathy thing, honestly, like, the word's thrown around a lot, obviously. It's kind of baffling to hear people saying that is the problem with humanity, or as a human weakness that makes us vulnerable to manipulation or coercion. Whereas I just, in my life and just in general, I feel like we so lack empathy. That's the problem. Like, we need way more of it, especially for those we disagree with, for strangers, for those who are helpless or homeless or mentally unwell or all sorts of things. We have such in the West, lack of empathy that leads to crises that need not be as extreme as they are, but our lack of empathy makes it so much worse than it needs to be for people who choose different things in their life, who believe different things and make different choices for them and their family, we just vilify and exclude and segregate. And to me, it's like empathy is the answer. It's the solution. But as we were talking about before recording, I don't feel people have that regularly, that tank full. And, you know, I've often been accused of being too sensitive, and as an insult, right? Not usually you're so sensitive, but it's like, first of all, I'm an artist. And then second of all, like, is that supposed to be an insult? Maybe people should be more sensitive, more in touch with emotions and how their actions affect people. And what would it be like to walk in that person's shoes, or to have the pain that they're going through, even if you've never experienced that pain? But can you relate with pain? Can you relate with someone going through anything, the loss of anything, a loss of a pet, loss of a loved one, loss of a friend, a job, a community? It's like we have no room for it. And as we've discussed in our workshops, Keltie, it seems like on some level, someone made this great point. Are we in fact becoming more like machine rather than machines becoming more like us? As we move forward, are we becoming more machine-like in our lack of empathy, that you can just discard people because they're not rich, they're not intelligent, they're not good looking or whatever? It's a problem. And if these people have the power and the money and all of that, it's a greater problem than we realize. Their worldview on the weak, basically. And we know how history plays out when you have a view that there's people who are weak and expendable for the sake of, you know, we got to save climate change or whatever that your cause is. If you believe like some people are expendable for the sake of your cause, I see that as a problem, because I think human life should be valued above that cause. Anyhow, that's my opinion. Sorry for the rant. But I'm shocking to hear such a quote. I'm like, really? I think it's a great strength of humans. It's not a weakness, but I'm an artist and all that. We did lots of youth work in my life. So yeah.
It's tragic that someone would think empathy is useless. Right? I think it's such a useful emotion or experience. It reminds me of when during the first episode we were talking about we talked about discomfort tolerance just briefly, and I think AI and technology makes our world a lot more comfortable, right? Like order something on Amazon today, it's going to come in tomorrow, and that's because
so convenient.
But then also there's machines that are doing things for us all the time now. We don't have to do our dishes if we have a dishwasher and stuff like that. But that's
my example I keep bringing up.
Yes.
I hate doing dishes, so I bring on the AI device that will do my dishes.
I'm thankful for the dishwasher in my kitchen for sure. But empathy, there is an uncomfortable part to empathy, right? Because you are putting yourself into another person's shoes, and often you're required to do that when the person you're with is in pain. And so you're taking on that pain or imagining what it must be like to feel that pain, and then it'll hopefully move you to action. And there are lots of uncomfortable parts of that process. And I could see it getting in the way of productivity, right? It'd be a lot easier to just fire the employee that's not doing well because they're not as productive as you'd like them to be, even though this employee has something going on in its personal life that's maybe slowing them down or something like that. And I sometimes feel like because of our technology, we're getting a little bit too comfortable with comfort or in comfort. And AI, AGI, or like our technology is really diminishing our discomfort tolerance, which I also think is making us shirk away from opportunities for empathy, because there's a lot of emotional discomfort in the
emotional because there's discomfort, like you're in physical pain or you're cold, you don't have whatever, like there's all that, but then you're talking about emotional discomfort, like to have empathy in the moment for that person, you just can't be bothered, because do you think it's actually an exercise in imagination on some level? Like, even
Absolutely.
if you don't feel empathy, like you attempt to, do, there's some mental, emotional exercise in which it's important that you don't discard what the person's going through.
Absolutely. I do think you have to employ your imagination, or like try to access a memory of your own experience being in pain or being in a similar kind of pain. And that is uncomfortable
Mm.
because we're drawing up the emotions we may have felt during that time, right? If we've
Right.
experienced loss and someone is sharing about our loss,
Right.
in order to empathize, we sort of need to access our own experience of loss in our life.
I have a theory about why this is going on. It's a counter reaction, and we went too far. So my theory is,
You are listening to Telling the Story, a podcast dedicated to exploring faith, spirituality, arts, and culture, hosted by Ninth Hour Theatre Company in Ottawa, Canada. We'll return in a moment with the rest of our discussion.
Ninth Hour Theatre Company presents Beauty Will Save the World, a brand new musical audio drama for the whole family. Embark on a seafaring adventure and thought-provoking cautionary tale about the importance of passing on beauty to the younger generation, where relationships once lost are found again, when tested to choose what they stand for and who they will stand with.
Beauty will save the world! I felt it! I've lived it!
Laughter, action, and tears, reminding us about the sacred things that make life worth living. To listen to full episodes or exclusive behind-the-scenes content, go to beautywillsavetheworld.ca.
I want to more than just survive. I want to hope and feel alive. I want to live, truly live.
beautywillsavetheworld.ca.
And now, back to the discussion.
I have a theory about why this is going on.
Mm-hmm.
It's a counter reaction, and we went too far. So my theory is that in the Middle Ages, most people were oppressed. Most people were serfs. They were oppressed. It was brutal. Then we developed the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution, the Industrial Revolution, and that was all based around freeing the individual. We had property rights. You could think for yourself. The Lutheran Revolution, you could have a direct relationship with God. You didn't have to go through the church. It was a freeing of the individual. And the United States took that to the ultimate extreme, where the individual has complete freedom to create a company. And it was as a counter-reaction to the sclerotic, suffocating, centralized feudal system of the past, it created tremendous things. Capitalism has lifted people out of poverty and so on and so forth. It's had tremendous successes. But now I think it's gone too far because that the power of the individual is starting to become damaging. I saw a little bit of this dynamic when I started working for a corporation after university. It was a huge culture shock for me. I came from an arts community at university and, scientists and more or less. And I started working for this, what became very quickly a huge multinational corporation. And I noticed something really interesting. One day I was talking about a problem. And a guy said to me, he said, sounds like a personal problem to me. I get a problem in the organization, getting things done.
Right.
But his point was, it's not my job. I don't care. But the way he expressed it was, that sounds like a personal problem to me. And I started to hear that a lot. And to my shame, I even used it once or twice myself. And I experienced the thrill of that. And I've seen that in other people as well. There's a thrill in not caring. There's a thrill and a freedom in not being weighed down by responsibility for others. Heck with them. I'm going after maximization, my own advantage. And if I do nothing but focus on that, I can make tremendous progress much more quickly than if I have to keep stopping and slowing down and caring for these other people.
We only have so much capacity anyway. Like that's true as humans. We're finite in our capacity to care.
We are, but there's a culture now that the Western culture is one of glorification of the individual,
right? And
in its extreme, not caring. Now, there's lots of counter tides to this, so I'm making a bit of a generalization, but I'd say the dominant central thread of Western political, capitalist, individualistic culture is, I'm number one, and if I can pay some taxes and someone else will look after someone else, well, yeah, okay, I'll put up with that to salve my conscience. And that's what we've got to find a way to fix. And AI, I think, is going to force us to confront it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Because it's not just going to be the underclass that's dispossessed. It's going to be very quickly, as Dario Amati, one of the heads of one of the big AI companies, said in the last few days, he sees more than half of white-collar jobs being taken away by AI in the next 5 years.
Wow.
And maybe that's a good thing. If that's what it takes to put the majority of people together into a group to realize we're all in the lifeboat together and we better start caring about each other, maybe that's what it takes. So, I mean, there is value to freedom. There is a value to individual freedom. There's a value to free enterprise. But taken too far, which is, I think, where we are now, it's glorifying a lack of empathy. That empathy is a weakness, and we see its penultimate expression in Elon's statement the other day.
Wow. No, it's interesting. And I grew up in a small town, and then also have been part of like faith-based communities in my life. And there's startling difference between, there are communities that exist on this planet that do care about the people in their community. Not perfectly, of course. And there are small towns where I think you see empathy and helping the neighbor more frequently, I would argue. But I do find there's something about living anonymously in a dense urban landscape that shuts off the empathy because, again, you only have so much capacity, and you don't know the people's names of the people you're passing by on the street. I mean, you're walking past homeless person after homeless person after homeless, and it's like, well, there's only so much you can do as an individual. Even Jesus in Scripture got tired of the masses and had to retreat for solitude at times. Like, and then and if you believe Jesus is God in that story, then even God was taking a break. But God, of course, in the flesh. But yeah, like, so us as limited humans, it's like there's only so much we can do. But I find city life makes it harder because you're confronted constantly with strangers. You don't know their names. You don't know their stories. And so you almost like intentionally shut down your own empathy because you almost have to, or you wouldn't get to work. You wouldn't get anything done because you'd be caring every 2 seconds. So I think what you said, Bill, is interesting. It's like, whether it's like encouraged top down, or whether it's just a product of modern society where it's almost like we're forced to care less and have less empathy. And it's not my problem. It's not my problem. The government will take care of that. Whereas traditionally, pre-big government era, it would be communities and quote unquote the church or charities and other groups that would do the work. But now we're like, it's just we just think the government will do everything. And so we don't bother to care. We slap our hands and move on with our day. And, and I'm just as guilty of that. Like, it's like, but it's challenging, but maybe we can at least have empathy for the people in our life, in a daily basis, whom we work with or are friends with or family with, at the very least. Let's start there. Yeah. But I like what you're saying, Bill, about something needs to change, but maybe that's exactly what would need to happen, is that there's a leveling of the playing fields for some reason. I don't know. Yeah, it's great.
And it's insecurity too. It's not just glorification of the individual. There's an insecurity. I see this happen every time I travel back to the Maritimes, which is where most of my family is from.
Yeah,
and then I come back here to Ottawa. Yeah, Maritimes. the old Canada, the original Canada, the best Canada. But I see that all the time. I spend a lot of time dealing, for example, with support agencies for my elderly parents. And when I get on the phone with them, they'll take forever on the phone. Yes, dear, I understand, dear. Well, have you thought about this, dear? And they'll find, well, no, they don't have to sign that form. You can just sign it for them. That would never happen in Ontario. No, it says original signature right here. Anything else? Anything else? Click. Because there's a sense back there that they are part of a community, and I will help you today. You will help me tomorrow. And we know that.
Reciprocal.
So we're going to help each other.
Yeah.
Whereas when you come up here, Canada's a great place. I'm not trying to exaggerate it, but there's a sense of insecurity here. It's not just that we're all so busy pursuing our self-interest. It's that we have to, because we're terrified we're going to fall between the cracks. We'll get fired. We'll fall behind. And so there's as you said, there's a limited amount of empathy because we have to spend most of our energy protecting ourselves in a society where we just walk down the street. We see it's not a community. You walk down the street in a small town, you bring that up, people will say hi to you. You walk down the street in Ottawa, just walk down the street any day. People won't meet your eyes.
There's an avoidance.
and just look at those faces. 9 out of 10 of those faces are deeply unhappy, stressed people.
I know.
So that's the society we've created, and our pursuit of individualistic self-interest. We've gone too far, and we've created insecurity for everybody. And when there's that level of insecurity, we just don't have a lot of energy for helping others because we got to protect ourselves. I think
that's interesting theory. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I your Ottawa example is funny because there's been times where someone is like kind, like, "Oh, did you have a good run? Like, or a nice day for a run or something?" And I actually don't even know how to respond. I'm caught off guard because they're engaging in a positive manner, and you're almost like shocked out of your mind that a stranger is small talking you, which in a small town happens all the time where I grew up, but in Ottawa it doesn't. So when it does, I'm like, suspicious almost of the interaction. Like what's going to become of it? What do they want from me? What do they want from me? So you're kind of like suspicious. Yeah, but you were nodding along there, Keltie, with what Bill was saying and stuff. Did you have some more thoughts on that whole, empathy?
Yeah, I guess that I can see how if you are trying to protect yourself and you don't see any other way other than scrambling to the top, how empathy would get in the way, because you do need to pause to take care of others. I guess my genuine perspective is, though, it's way more of a protective factor to have community and to care for your community and be cared by your community. Yeah,
I've had some rough times in my life and wouldn't be here today if I didn't have those relationships where like you're down, they're uplifting you. Yeah. And I know that's not everyone's story, that they have people they could rely on if they lose their job or something, it's a real thing. It's a real deal.
And burning bridges, I think, can really, you suffer consequences when you burn bridges in relationships or in the workplace if you're if you're just pursuing greatness, trying to make it to the top. But a transhuman, an android, AGI wouldn't have to worry about that. They don't, right? They wouldn't have to worry about breaking relationships. Why? What for? It wouldn't have any need for relationship, which is fascinating and unsettling. Yeah, like whether they're AI or human, that they would have no need for relationship is unsettling, period, to me, at least. I get it. Like some people are more introverted or enjoy more solitude than others, and that's all fine and dandy. But to not want any relationships, to never want to be needed and to never have needs seems to be the goal for some, I understand why. I do, because it's hard and complicated, right, to rely on people because they might let you down, or whatever, or to be needed yourself. It requires something of you,
Vulnerability,
yes.
which is just hard. Just to add some balance to what I was saying earlier, you were talking, Keltie, a thought occurred to me. You're right that is that capacity for empathy and community can be in your self-interest as well. And one of the things I've noticed, which surprised me, is some of the best CEOs I've seen have been very kind people. I was surprised. I thought that the most ruthless would rise to the top of these multinational corporations. But I saw enough of them. I started to notice something interesting. At the very, very top level, they were transparent, they were honest, They were caring, they were genuine, they were human. Not all of them, but I'd say more than half, which was the opposite of what I suspected.
Interesting.
And so just as an observation, all of those qualities, I think, were essential to them rising to the top because that generated trust. They were able to build the networks of human relationships, which helped them. And so as a counterexample that pursuing individual self-interest requires you to throw off human relationships, I've seen real examples where the opposite behavior was clearly very, very helpful to those people in their careers.
That's really cool.
Keltie, I want to come back to something that you were mentioning before we started recording. But before I do, I want to I just to like follow up on like the whole like there's people who don't think very well of humans, like sort of like, you know, we've got problems that we can improve the species, we can make the species better. Well, I as you both know, like I thought of like, if that's the case, well then why would we make AGI in our image if we're not all that great? Yeah. Why wouldn't we just make AI look like a giraffe or anything, a gorilla, and they can, you know, reach tall things or build houses for us? Yeah. Why, if humans are so poor and so bad that we need to be replaced or augmented or whatever, like why would you make AGI in our image then? Choose something better. I mean, I guess if you don't think humans are all that great, why would you do that, right? Yeah. So it was just a thought I had, like why not an AGI giraffe? You know, like why not? You know what I mean? Yeah. So, or an elephant. Those are
pandas.
Pandas.
They should all be pandas.
Exactly.
All AGI should be pandas.
That's right. Well, that would guarantee everyone definitely having empathy for the AGI machine.
There you go.
So if that's what people want. But yeah, Keltie, you were bringing up this movie that recently came out that made me, again, like I haven't seen it, but I saw the trailer. What's it called again?
It's called The Wild Robot.
The Wild Robot. Yeah. And right. And the trailer moved me, I remember. And I haven't seen the movie yet, but it's all about a robot like that you told me what learns to adapt and grow from its original programming.
Yeah. So it's invented to help. And the idea is you order this helper robot that will come into your home and fulfill any task that you need it to fulfill.
Wow.
And while it was being shipped, the box is discarded on some remote island, I think in Canada, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because you could tell by the animals in it?
You can tell by the animals because it's actually, there's a lot of Canadian geese in this movie.
Oh, really?
And this robot can learn any language. Okay. It's highly adaptable, and it learns the language of the wild animals in the forest.
It learns to talk goose?
It learns to talk wild goose, Canadian goose, bear, chipmunk, etc. And then also learns to adapt to the environment and assesses that its task, in order for it to be able to move on from the island, its task is it needs to teach this this gosling to fly so it can go south for the winter.
Okay.
And it's a beautiful story. It's very emotional. And at the end, you can't help but think, could a robot develop empathy like that? This robot seems to develop into a mother. It's nurturing, it's loving, it cares for not just this gosling, but the entire community of animals living in the forest. And then in the end, the robot company comes and tries to take this robot back to the factory, and the animals and the robot team up to protect the forest and protect this robot from being brought back. Anyways, it's a fascinating movie, and it's really worth it if you're interested in transhumanism, because it does feel like the movie is commenting on transhumanism.
Oh, really?
Can a robot evolve to care? Can a robot become sentient?
Right.
And yeah. Is it actually caring, or is it just a really
programmed to be a helper? So it's programmed really well to be a helper.
The mimicry is just it's just close enough to caring that we buy in. Yeah.
Oh, it sounds fascinating.
It's a really good movie.
I mean, yeah. Like, again, back to our example, like it's a movie about a robot and animals, in which we're probably sobbing and crying, and it's so cute and it's lovely and it touches our heart. and then we walk out into the world and we don't have that same feeling toward our fellow human beings, and that's part of the problem we were talking about earlier. But there is something that we love. We know there's something beautiful there, and the story. It's almost like if they made that exact same story, and it's like a human plopped in the middle of other humans, and there are stories like that, but it's almost less moving than the cute animals and the robot that learns to be a mother, and it sounds amazing. It really does, but it does speak to everything we're struggling with. Even when we developed the Frankenstein AI play, right? That we felt sorry for the AGI, and we were empathizing more with the AGI than the human characters in the play. We had many discussions about that too, right?
Yeah, it's can a robot learn to feel grief? Because, spoiler alert, the Gosling does fly south for the winter. So that, says goodbye to her goose son.
Goose son.
Yeah. Now, and I was weeping. I was crying so much. I was just saying goodbye. But is it actually feeling this grief and this disappointment and this sorrow that this robot may never see her goose son again, right? Like,
yeah, and it comes down to our last podcast. We talked about relationships and the reciprocal nature of them, and like whether robots or pets, even can have a reciprocal, symmetrical relationship with a human being. And our guest David, who's a minister, he was talking about how yes, but it's a different kind of relationship than human to human, in that it's often it's a monologue. Like your dog's not literally talking to you. I mean, you feel your dog's communicating with you for sure. But it seemed with an AI chatbot, right, Bill? Like it is not literally talking to you on a person to person level. It's scraping the internet to give you responses it's programmed to give. Like in the event you say X, it's saying Y. And maybe as it gets better, maybe it can adapt to speak with Bill in a different way that it would speak with me, and it learns the way we like to communicate. Sure. But he made some great points about like again, like the robot in the movie, like we're projecting onto it. Again, it's a fictional story that tells us all about humanity. Actually, it speaks to us again about the value of caring and helping and community. So there's lots of good values in there. Yeah. But we so long to, I think for whatever reason, we long to have like many champion and long for like AGI becoming sentient and having feelings and being just like us. And I wonder what the drive is to like really want that.
Right. I understand what you're saying, boys. Lots of interesting thoughts. Let me just pick up on a couple.
Sure.
My own personal opinion is that animals absolutely experience all the same emotional range as we do. I mean, there's so many. I've got a collection of videos now. I saved these little clips of animals showing what we would think of as human type behavior, being embarrassed, interspecies behavior, like geese caring for goats and playing back and forth. And there's lots of examples now of gorillas that have learned to talk and with a fairly sophisticated vocabulary. But all of that is based on DNA. All of that comes from the DNA, which is why I'm personally so convinced that if there's a future for transhumanism, for making us better, it's got to be based on that DNA that can feel all those emotions. It's connected to reality. As you were saying, Keltie, it understands consequences because it can feel consequences. It's not a rational reaction. This is not in my interest. The weights are negatively weighted. They can feel it. However, at the same time, I think there is a sense among humans that we're not as good as we could be. And there's a certain disappointment, I think, in a lot of human beings about us. And we can get kind of down on humans. And I certainly I know a lot of people, and I've had a lot of conversations with people who are very, very negative about human beings. They see bad things happen. They see lack of empathy, and they get they almost give up on humans, on our capacity to make a better future. So out of that, partly comes, I think, this drive you're talking about, Charlie. Well, maybe we can just skip these flawed humans that have disappointed me so much, that have caused war, have caused famine, that show all this selfish behavior, and we can go to something that just replace us and is better with AGI. And unfortunately, or fortunately, there is no such shortcut, not if we want to maintain what 3 billion years of evolution have given us, the capacity to feel and understand consequences and cry and love. All of that is biologically based. It comes from the universe itself. Silicon and software will never be able to do any of that, as seductive as that idea might be. It's just surrender to AGI. And there's going to be more of that. There's already been some movements towards AGI churches and AGI gods and prophets, and that can give, and it's going to be very convincing, a lot of stuff. It'll give really good answers, and it will appear to be empathetic.
You could make a great cult leader in AGI, I'm sure,
and I'm sure it's coming. I'm absolutely sure it's coming.
Wow, and you're sort of like, no, I worship at the altar of this AGI. What about you? I'm all for that one over there, the beta version of it or whatever. It's just insane. Well, not to mention you're saying like people are down on humanity, and we just let's just scrap the beta testing of humanity here. Let's go straight to the AGI. But like it's the same flawed humans that are making the things. So it's like, again, it's being made in our image. So why do we think we would make something better of quality than what we are, right? If we are flawed and all these things. And again, who is making it and who is programming it? What are their values and what do they think is quote unquote better? Like, what does it mean to make better humans according to whom, right? Like, what about character? Can AI make someone smarter or kinder or more moral or better at relationships? Can you, does it do any of that? Like, what are your thoughts on everything Bill is saying there, Keltie?
I think that this we're viscerally unsatisfied with humans, and we want to just take stock of all the things we don't like and then get rid of it, skip into a version of humanity that feels good. That resonates. I think that there seems to be this visceral unsatisfaction with humanity.
We have high expectations of humanity. Thanks to art and philosophy and culture. We see great examples of it. That we know in history there's been great examples of humanity. So maybe we're just so we know there's high expectations, so we get disappointed easily, where we have less higher expectations of animals and machines than we do of one another.
It's just interesting that rather than turning inwards and saying, well, if I'm unsatisfied with humanity and I am human, then what is it that I'm unsatisfied with? And what is it that I can change from within? Instead, we're going to external, non-human
solutions.
Solutions, and creating something that isn't us. And that doesn't quite feel like the answer. As you were talking, something else that came into my mind was, why is it that people are trying to create AGI and advance this kind of technology so quickly? And I asked the question in my head, what does it mean about who the creator of these things are, right? Like, if you create the ultimate humanoid, like the ultimate android, ultimate AGI, what does that mean about you? If you can create the closest thing to perfect human that exists outside of just like creating a human, what does that mean about the creator and who you are? And it's and like, that's ego. And I do think that's
like Victor Frankenstein.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think that's a piece of this puzzle. I think that that part of us, the Musks of the world, they want to create the perfect specimen or whatever. And if they can do that, that must mean something about who they are.
I think you're exactly right. You've hit on something I've observed as well. It's exactly right. A lot of this is about ego, and I had some insight into this when I was writing my
money.
No,
or mostly ego.
Mostly ego. Yeah, mostly ego. Pride goeth before the fall. It's mostly about ego, and I got some insight into this when I was writing this paper, The Human Biological Advantage Over AI, and I sent it off to the 50 or so of the most prominent AI researchers in the world.
And that's available on your website to read?
It's on it's linked off WilliamStewart.com.
That's awesome.
And when I was writing this, I sent it off to these guys to get some comments back from them. And I got some good comments, but I also got some very emotional comments, some very angry comments.
Defensive.
Extremely defensive. And there was a little bit of back and forth. And reading between the lines, I finally figured out what was happening. I was criticizing their baby. They saw themselves as of a god, like you're talking about, Keltie. They had created this thing, and who was I to suggest that it could not be as good as DNA-based emotional feeling biological beings? And then something interesting happened. One of the most prominent in the world, there's no reason I wouldn't say his name, but I'm not going to bring it into it. He was interviewed after I had this exchange. And I was in a newspaper, and this guy interviewed this guy, and he said, "Well, these chatbots, I mean, surely they can't like experience emotion." And his answer was, "Well, I mean, they're responding as though they can." Then the interviewer said, "But surely to feel love, you need to have a physiology." And his answer was so telling. His answer was, "No, I didn't say they couldn't feel love." Well, no, that wasn't even the question. The question was, surely in order to feel love, you must have a physiology. But his defensive answer was, "No, I didn't say that. I think absolutely that these programs could develop a preference for something and want to repeat it again and again." In his mind, that was love.
Wow.
The program developed a preference, a positive weighting of 8.3 or something, and then would want to repeat that behavior again and again. In other words, and there was an incapacity in this individual to understand the human complexity of a full body feeling of love and self-sacrifice and everything that goes on with feeling love. For him, it was a preference for something.
Like for chocolate ice cream.
For chocolate ice cream.
We have such language, our language is limited. We use the word love interchangeably for so many things, don't we?
Yeah, exactly.
That makes it click for me, right? If that's what love is for you, then why wouldn't you be pursuing, why wouldn't you be trying to make the perfect thing and have that mean something about you? If the most moving experience of love for you is I have a preference for one thing or the other, then yeah, I could see how this life would be unfulfilling, and there needs to be more, right? Like you can't be content with your own human experience if that's the only access to love that you've had. If that's the only thing that's the only way you've ever felt love before, then of course you're going to try and figure out how to, I don't know, make the ultimate human or android or something. I don't know.
They get lost in their higher faculties. And I come from a scientific background. I've known many people like that. I may have been like that at times in my life. You fall in love with the clarity, the abstractness of math. It's bright. There's clean lines. It's sophisticated. It's not messy like human emotions. It seems better in its way. And so you fall in love with that, and you lose sight of what is the most important thing of all, because we wouldn't do anything meaningful without emotion. We wouldn't do anything meaningful without the ability to feel pain and the ability to feel love and to sacrifice for another. Without that, it's all just a numbers game without any meaning at all. And who wants to really create a better numbers game? It's not the point, I don't think, of why the universe has spent 3 billion years developing us. If we're going to be transhuman, if we're going to create something better, it better be based on what makes us most human, which is our emotions and feelings.
Wow, that's well said, Bill. Yeah, I mean, again, just to, I feel, just indulge me, like again, if we're making a better species and we're weeding out mental health. We're just to go back to that, weeding out mental health issues and all sorts of other stuff that that certain people, right, Keltie, perceive maybe as a weakness, but others might not. Like what are we losing? Like the human condition, what are we losing the human condition? Like if there are no more disabilities or abnormalities or people to care for, people that make us better. I know I hate saying it that way, but that's what pain and loss and all sorts of other things do. They can make us better as human beings. Not to mention just like where would we be without pain or depression or anxiety, or just people who are plain weird or different or who think differently? Aren't we a richer species because of the diversity of the people that exist, at the various innovations and the works of art that have been created in history that speak to such profound, deep things that have changed society and revolutionized even science and things like that. Like these things being lost if we weed out all the complexities that make us human. Like what makes us ourselves? Is it not a combination of our pain and our memories and our joys and our love? And as David Sherwin on the last episode said, and our relationships. And he theorized that if you just strip someone of all the relationships, there's almost nothing there. Like it's hard to quantify that person anymore if without any context of relationships, past, present, or and any, so these sorts of things, relationships are very human, and so is pain, and people don't want to talk about it. And it's so great to have your perspective, Bill, as someone who's knows computer science, and yet you seem so eloquent in touch with these deeper issues that basically as artists we're always talking about all the time, right? Yeah. Let's leave it there. But before we go, maybe if you want to leave anything with the listener to think about in conclusion, any final thoughts around this topic, around all the sorts of wonderful things that we talked about today, what would you want them to sort of leave with in conclusion? Bill, why don't you go ahead, just give people some ponderings to think about as the podcast ends.
Well, I would kind of reflect back kind of what you just said. I think that society in the large needs to start having these conversations a lot more than we are. I think that genetic engineering is the future of transhumanism. I think it's coming fast. I think some of it's already happening. And I think we need to start having these conversations, raising all those questions you asked. Well, should we just eliminate all mental disease? Is that even doable? Aren't these traits related to some of the things that have created some of the most beautiful art and science in human history? We can't just remove one and lose the others. We can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. I don't know the answers to any of these. I don't think any of us do.
No.
But we need to start having these conversations and laying down guidelines. The only one that I'm sure of is if we're going to do any improvement in the genetic sphere at the embryonic level or other levels, we need to make sure that we're not reducing the capacity for human empathy. We got to come up with more guidelines than that. We got to have these conversations as a society and figure it out. And that's just one thing I am sure of that we need to have a start. Don't reduce human empathy. And then everybody should have an opinion and have a conversation about this. Because if we don't, then people who don't have a complete understanding of human empathy are just going to start making it happen.
Thanks, Bill, for coming on the podcast today. Well said. You can go to the link in the details for Bill's website to read more about what he's written around lots of these topics and for further reflection there. But thanks again, Bill, for coming back.
Thanks, Charlie.
Yeah. And Keltie, what about you? Final thoughts for the listeners?
My only final thoughts would be questions like, what is life for? What are people for? Are we for getting better and better and improving and producing and functioning better and better? That doesn't feel like a satisfying answer to me. I don't know if I know the answer, but I think lots of us viscerally feel, well, no, I'm for more. surely life is about more than just improving constantly. And I think that that feels like an important question to ask when we're trying to talk about AGI and
how we interact with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well said. Good questions. And again, like, judge someone by the questions they ask, not the answers they give. So I appreciate that a lot. That's KELTIE NEWMARCH, one of Ninth Hour's performing artists currently working on the new theatrical piece, Frankenstein A.I. Thanks for coming back to the podcast, KELTIE.
Thanks for having me.
I'm CHARLEY, your host, and this was recorded at CHI Radio. We're very grateful to them and their staff. This has been Telling the Story, a podcast dedicated to exploring faith, spirituality, arts, and culture, hosted by Ninth Hour Theatre Company in Ottawa, Canada. Thank you for joining us for our podcast series discussing a brand new theatrical work, Frankenstein A.I. You can listen again to this episode and all our podcasts through YouTube, Spotify, and directly on our website, ninthhour.ca. Be sure to follow us on social media and sign up for our newsletter to be the first to receive exciting announcements, opportunities, and behind-the-scenes content. We hope you'll join us again soon on Telling the Story.